In the Hindu Kush mountains of northern Pakistan, in 3 narrow valleys most of the country has never seen, there are people with green eyes, blue eyes, light brown hair. In a region where almost nobody looks like that, about 4,000 of them. They're called the Kalash. For a place this small and this remote, the rest of the world has been strangely curious about them for a long time. Princess Diana came here in 1991, drawn, at least in part, by a single, irresistible question. Who actually are these people? For centuries, local myths offered an easy answer. They were the lost soldiers of Alexander the Great. Left behind during his march through India, 326 BCE, a romantic tale of Greek blood stranded in the peaks. But genetics has a habit of destroying romance and replacing it with something far stranger. When scientists mapped the Kalash genome, they found no Greek military march. Instead, they found a genetic time capsule. The Kalash are an ancient genetic isolate. They haven't mixed with their neighbors for thousands of years. They have been sitting in those valleys, drifting, preserved. And when you trace their deep ancestry, past the empires, past the Bronze Age, their DNA begins to drift north, deep into the frozen expanse of Paleolithic Siberia. They share a unique genetic signature with a population that no longer exists, a phantom lineage that geneticists call the ancient North Eurasians. To find them, we have to look through a telescope 24,000 years into the past, to a child who died on the shores of Lake Baikal. Siberia, 1928, near the village of Malta, along the banks of the Belaya River, just west of Lake Baikal. It actually starts smaller than that. A villager is digging out his own cellar when his shovel hits something hard, a huge bone. He shrugs, tosses it over the fence, and forgets about it. Local children find it next. They decide it's perfect for sledding and spend the afternoon racing it down the frozen village road, with no idea they're riding on something tens of thousands of years old. The noise draws out a neighbor who writes straight to the museum in Irkutsk. A young Soviet researcher named Mikhail Gerasimov is sent to investigate. He has to wait for the ground to thaw before he can dig into the permafrost at all. He isn't just finding temporary hunting camps. He is uncovering a massive, permanent, upper Paleolithic settlement. A sophisticated world frozen in time. Long houses built entirely from the interlocking jawbones and tusks of woolly mammoths. Roofs made from intertwined reindeer antlers, weighted down by heavy stones to survive the brutal Ice Age winds. 15 of them in a row along the riverbank. People lived here, cooked here, raised children here for generations. Inside these ruins lie incredible pieces of art, carved ivory figurines of mammoths, swimming birds, and the famous Malta Venus statues, some with intricate hairstyles carved into the bone. This was a thriving, artistic culture. And beneath the dirt floor of one of these heavy mammoth bone shelters, a grave. A child, roughly 3 to 4 years old, laid to rest with immense care. On his head, an ivory diadem. A necklace of 120 bone beads. On his chest, a carved flying bird pendant. At his side, a flint dagger. The whole grave floor was lined with red ochre. Gerasimov himself didn't think a 3 or 4-year-old could have made or fully used any of this. He suspected it meant something more, a rite of passage maybe, or a belief about what a child needed for the journey after death. He is known to science simply as MA1, the Malta boy. For nearly a century, his tiny skeleton sat in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, just another frozen relic of the Ice Age. Then, in 2013, an international team led by the geneticist Eske Willerslev extracted DNA from the boy's upper arm bone. They expected him to look like modern East Asians. After all, he lived in eastern Siberia. The results shocked the lab. Malta boy had no direct genetic ties to modern East Asians. None. Instead, his DNA looked like a bridge. His maternal DNA carried the exact signature of Western Eurasian hunter-gatherers. And his paternal line sat at the very root of a lineage that would later become widespread across Europe and South Asia. His own population, what we now call the ancient North Eurasians, was already a blend. Roughly 2/3 tied to ancient Western Eurasia, 1/3 tied to ancient East Asia, a population that existed before the rest of the world had sorted itself into the groups we'd recognize today. He wasn't a modern human in that sense. He was something more like an ancestor of many of them at once, a snapshot taken before Europe, Asia, and the Americas went their separate ways. It's now the oldest fully sequenced human genome on Earth. So once they had it, scientists did the obvious thing. They took his genome and ran it against every population they had genetic data for. Population by population, continent by continent. The same way you'd compare two photographs looking for a family resemblance. And the matches that came back didn't make sense. Not at first. Malta sits where it does for a reason. A river, the Belaya, feeding into something much larger. Lake Baikal, deep enough and old enough to hold water for millions of years without ever fully mixing it. That's roughly what happened to this boy's ancestry too. It didn't spread out evenly, the way a single drop would through a small, fast-moving stream. It split. Part of it ran one direction, part of it ran another. And depending on where it finally settled, a wide, busy river system, or a still, isolated lake, it ended up looking completely different thousands of years later. In most places his ancestry reached, it behaved like the river. It mixed. Every generation it combined with new arrivals, new neighbors, new genomes. Until, thousands of years on, the original signal was only a faint trace, diluted past the point of easy detection. In one place, it behaved like the lake. That place is Pakistan. Researchers date the Kalash splitting off from their neighbors to roughly 11,800 years ago. From that point on, they married almost entirely within their own valleys. Generation after generation, for thousands of years, almost nothing new flowed in. When researchers ran the Kalash genome directly against the Malta boys, the match was the strongest found anywhere in South Asia. Roughly half of their ancestry traces to this same ancient steppe-related source. Nowhere else in the region comes close. The Kalash aren't different because they evolved into something new. They're different because almost nothing ever got the chance to mix in. And that's only one side of this story. The river went somewhere too. For decades, the consensus on Native American origins was simple. Ice Age hunters walked across the Bering Land Bridge from Northeast Asia. They were, everyone assumed, purely of East Asian descent. But the Malta boy rewrote the map. Kelly Graff at Texas A&M University was the researcher who physically extracted the DNA from the boy's arm bone. In her own words, it shows he had close genetic ties to today's Native Americans and some Western Eurasians. We think these Ice Age people were quite mobile. And the line that mattered most. Our study proves that Native American ancestors migrated to the Americas from Siberia and not directly from Europe, as some have recently suggested. When scientists compared his DNA to modern groups, the numbers came back staggering. Modern Native Americans derive between 14 and 38% of their total ancestry directly from the Malta boys' population, up to 38%. In some indigenous populations of the Andes, that same ancient signature has been measured as high as 42%, among the highest figures found anywhere on the continent. It means Native Americans are a deeply unique lineage. They are the descendants of a profound ancient meeting. Somewhere east of Lake Baikal, ancestral East Asians met the ancient North Eurasians. They mixed. They formed a new, distinct population, the ancestral Native Americans. And they carried that combined inheritance across the land bridge, all the way to the tip of South America. It also explains something that puzzled anthropologists for years. Some of the oldest skeletons ever found in the Americas, Kennewick man among them, had skull shapes that didn't look East Asian at all. For decades, that fed a theory that Europeans had somehow crossed the Atlantic first. They hadn't. No European population alive today is as close to Native Americans, genetically, as this one Siberian child's population is. The strange skulls were never evidence of a European crossing. They were evidence of him. And this is where the loop closes. The Kalash, hiding in the valleys of Pakistan, carry the strongest living echo anywhere in South Asia of this boy's ancestry, roughly half their genome. The Native Americans carry a different, equally deep echo of the very same population, up to 38%, by a completely separate route, thousands of years apart, neither one ever aware the other existed. One branch stayed locked in the high mountain passes of the Hindu Kush. The other walked across an entire continent, all the way to the tip of South America.